I was not intending to make a video today. I have a lot of things that I'm recording at the moment for a course that I am working on, and my intention was not to record a video, but I came across this video on social media from a scientist that I personally like. She's a British scientist and she has an excellent way of explaining complicated ideas, complicated matters, but in a way that is easy to understand and is interesting to listen to. The video that she created was very wholesome content. And if you don't know what the word wholesome means, it's like genuine, honest, makes you feel good. There's no motive behind the content to make you buy something or to encourage you to have an opinion in a particular way. It's just to make you feel good. And I love this kind of content. It's what I try to do with a lot of my videos, is create this very warm, genuine feeling. I don't want anyone to feel like my English is bad or I don't know these words. In the era of social media, there are a lot of people telling you you're not good enough. And I just think the way she describes things, it identifies that you don't necessarily know or understand what I'm talking about, but it doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means you don't know, you don't have that knowledge. So I wanted to use that video today to talk to you about some scientific vocabulary and some very, very wholesome content. I'm not sure why I suddenly got the energy to record this. Maybe it's because I recently had a comment from a subscriber that said that I show a lot of kindness in my videos, and maybe you agree, disagree, but that is what I try to do. I try to be very kind. We don't have a lot of kindness in the world at the moment, and if there's one thing that I want to do and be, is be kind to my students, to subscribers. So I hope you enjoy this video. I hope it gives you a good feeling, and hopefully you can learn some scientific words and a very interesting scientific fact. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let you watch the video first. It's 3 minutes long, so it is quite long, but it's worth it, I promise. And then afterwards, we will go through it together and stop in certain places and discuss some of the vocabulary used.
You have a literal switch in your skin that is pre-programmed to make you feel safe. Just unfortunately, you have to get somebody else to flip it. Inside your skin, there are these neurons, these little cells that will fire when they sense a particular type of touch, right? So some of them will go off when they feel pain, some when they feel hot or cold, some when you feel pressure. But in 1999, scientists made this really weird discovery. So they're like eavesdropping on some of these neurons using little electrodes, and they found one neuron in there that basically ignores everything, won't fire for any of that other stuff, will only go off if you trigger it with a really soft little gentle stroke. Okay, that's the only way you can get it to go off. So they decided to call these C-tactile afferents. I mean, we know for decades that there's these types of things that you find in animals. Like, this is the reason why when you kind of give a dog or a cat like a little scratch behind the ears and they just lean into it and love it, this is literally what's going on, right? It's their version of these neurons that are firing and being like, that's delicious. But in humans, they're a bit stranger. Like, there's some weird stuff going on. For example, there's this very, very narrow frequency in which these things will fire. If you go too fast, it's not interested. If you go too slow, also not interested at all. It has to be this sweet spot in the middle of about 3 centimeters per second that will make these things go off. We also know that the temperature really matters of the thing that's doing the stroking, right? So if it's too hot, don't care. Too cold, not interested. The sweet spot, again, is about 32 degrees centigrade, which is around about the temperature of somebody else's hand. Now, okay, if you're somebody like most of us who enjoy the feeling of soft caresses, then this is not going to be that much of a surprise. But the question is why? Evolution generally is about being as lazy as you can possibly be without dying, right? Why would evolution bother putting something like this? Putting, as though it's got agency. Why would you get something like this as a result of evolution? And then, just a couple of years ago, this group of scientists led by Ilona Croy had this genius idea. They took a group of mothers and they put them in a room holding their babies, and they didn't tell them what they were doing. They just sat back and observed them. And every single one of the mothers started stroking their babies. They weren't just stroking their babies randomly. Every one of them was stroking their babies at exactly the frequency that these neurons fire at. right? This is like no training, no kind of calibration. This is just like maternal instinct that knows the exact rhythm to make their baby feel good. And we now know that this neuron firing, right, is linked with lowering the baby's heart rate, reducing the baby's stress. And if you do this for preterm babies, you will literally reduce the amount of time that they spend in hospital. How gorgeous is that? That there is this like built-in biological lullaby that we are all pre-programmed to know the rhythm to even before we're born. What an added win that it just so happens to work for adults too.
Okay, so very beautiful. What I want you to do is ask yourself how much of that you understood. Was it 60%, 70%, 80%, perhaps 100%, perhaps even less, perhaps you understood nothing? I really like this lady's name is Hannah Fry. She is a British scientist, and I really like the way that she is very, very knowledgeable about her subjects, but explains them in such an easy to understand way. Her accent is also, I would say, very similar to mine, so it's not too strong, it's not too weak, it's quite a neutral British accent, so easy for non-native English speakers to understand. So I'm going to pause this video and talk about it. So sorry, Hannah, if you ever see this, there are going to be some paused moments of your face. I hope you don't mind. So first of all, she says you have a literal switch, or some people like to say literal. Literal, but in connected speech, we would say literal switch. Literal, so we have metaphorical, we have figurative, and we have literal. So literal means you actually have this. It's not a metaphor, it's not a figure of speech, it's not something we're using to describe something else, it is something we actually have. If I say it is literally raining, it means right now there is rain outside. You can't argue with me about this. But if I say metaphorically it's raining, okay, we understand maybe it's a bad day.
You have a literal switch in your skin that is pre-programmed to make you feel safe. Just unfortunately.
Okay, just then she said pre-programmed. In my last video, I talked about suffixes, I think. So we have prefixes and we have suffixes. Suffixes come at the end of a word, and prefixes come at the beginning of a word to change the meaning. So a programmed thing is like a scheduled thing. It's going to happen. So pre-programmed, the prefix pre means it is already planned ahead of time. We have pre-organized. This was organized months ago. To preview is to view something before it is available for everyone to see, for the general public to see. So pre-programmed, this was organized, this is in us before we have a chance to understand that it's in us.
You have to get somebody else to flip it. Inside your skin, there are these neurons, these little cells that will fire when they sense a particular type of touch, right? So some of them will go off when they feel pain.
Okay, two words there, neurons and fire. Neurons, cells as well, and fire. So when we talk about a cell, this is very scientific. Everything is made up of cells. And within these cells, we have neurons, protons. And when we talk about neurons within a person, within the skin, like she is referring to, it's something within the skin, we mean it sends a message. So when she says fire, we are using the word fire to mean it is activated and it sends a message to the brain. So in this case, it's either sending the message of, ow, that hurts, that's painful, or it's sending the message of, that feels really nice. I want more of this sensation.
When they sense a particular type of touch, right? So some of them will go off when they feel pain, some when they feel hot or cold, some when you feel pressure.
She just used a phrasal verb there, to go off, to go off. When something goes off, again, it means being activated. So to fire something, usually we use the word fire when we're talking about electricity. And often with the human body, we are referring to electricity. Of course, we know it's not, but it's a form of electricity that happens in our brains, in our bodies, with passing messages, firing up these messages, these neurons, these cells. To go off is a very similar thing. We can say a firework went off. It will go off. The clock bells will go off. It's the start of something. Something is triggered, and because of that, we have a reaction, which is the noise or a sound or something happens.
But in 1999, scientists made this really weird discovery. So they're like eavesdropping on some of these neurons using little electrodes, and they found one neuron in there that like
That's a really nice phrase there, eavesdropping. Now, eavesdropping means to listen to a conversation that you were not invited to. So sometimes you hear in movies or you read in books, people will say they were eavesdropping or stop eavesdropping. Again, it means you were not invited to listen to this conversation, so why are you still listening? So when she says scientists were eavesdropping on these neurons, it's a really beautiful, funny kind of way of imagining that these neurons were having a conversation and the scientists were listening without letting the neurons know that they were listening. She is personifying the neurons. Of course, they're not having a conversation and scientists are not listening to their conversation, eavesdropping. But what is happening is some sort of test was done and they could see the reactions that these neurons were having to different sensations.
basically ignores everything, won't fire for any of that other stuff, will only go off if you trigger it with a really soft little gentle stroke. Okay, that's the only way you can get it to go off.
Trigger. You might have heard this because it's very popular on social media at the moment to talk about being triggered. We never used to use this word to refer to humans. This is something new. This is the way the English language has changed. Scientifically and historically, the word trigger again means to start something. If you trigger a reaction, what you did caused that reaction. It was the start of that reaction. Whereas now we refer to triggering as, okay, I was triggered. What you said caused a reaction within me. What you did caused a negative or positive reaction within me. But typically we mean a negative reaction when we talk about being triggered or something triggers you. In this example, she's saying that the reaction doesn't happen unless this specific action happens first. So the reaction is not triggered until the action is done in a specific way.
So they decided to call these C-tactile afferents. I mean, we know for decades that there's these types of things that you find in animals. Like this is the reason why when you kind of give a dog or a cat like a little scratch behind the ears and they just like lean into it and love it. This is literally what's going on, right? It's their version of these neurons that are firing and being like, that's delicious. But in humans, they're a bit stranger. Like there's some weird stuff going on. For example, like there's this very, very narrow frequency in which these things will fire. If you go too fast, it's not interested.
Okay, that was quite a long sentence. So just in case you didn't understand, I will summarize. So she says the reason why dogs and cats, they lean into you when you stroke them, when you scratch behind their ears, is because these neurons are saying, that's good, I like that, do more of that. So their body is reacting to that good feeling. What she says here is narrow frequency. Now, a frequency is a level that something happens on. So usually we talk about electricity, sound, a vibration. Something happens or occurs at a particular level in this chart that we cannot see. It's not something we can see. So you probably know I do something frequently. When we do something frequently and we talk about the frequency that we do something at, we mean how often we do it. Well, the frequency that something happens at is how often it happens at that level, what level it happens at. A really good example of this is sounds. So very high-pitched sounds, very high sounds can apparently only be heard by children and animals. And as you get older, you stop being able to hear those sounds. Maybe it's because you don't need to hear those sounds anymore. Maybe it's because we get older and we lose the ability. I'm not sure. But in England, for example, in local parks, if they have a problem with teenagers hanging out there and drinking and smoking, they will play a very, very high-pitched sound at a very high frequency that only that age children can hear, those teenagers can hear. So if I was walking around the park, no problem, I wouldn't be able to hear it. But these teenagers can hear it and it's annoying and they don't want to stay in the park. They want to go home. So again, she's saying that the frequency, how you do it. So she's about to explain now, but if you go too fast, it doesn't work. If you go too slow, it doesn't work. There's a particular frequency that these neurons react to.
If you go too slow, also not interested at all. It has to be this sweet spot in the middle of about 3 centimetres per second that will make these things go off. We also know that the temperature really matters of the thing that's doing the stroking, right? So if it's too hot, don't care, too cold, not interested. The sweet spot, again, is about 32 degrees centigrade, which is around about the temperature of somebody else's hand.
So this is really nice. She says, if it's too hot, the neurons don't fire, they're not triggered. If it's too cold, the neurons don't fire, they're not triggered. So the sweet spot is a phrase to explain that within this area, within this frequency, within these parameters, you will see the reaction you want.
Now, okay, if you're somebody like most of us who enjoy the feeling of like soft caresses, then this is not going to be that much of a surprise. But the question is like, why?
Soft caresses. To caress is a very particular way of touching someone or something, I guess, but we don't usually use it with animals. We wouldn't caress an animal because the feeling of being caressed or caressing something identifies that there's a romantic feeling there or a very intimate feeling. So like she explains in the video, between a mother and a child. If you caress your partner, it's a very romantic, loving way of touching someone.
But the question is like, why? Evolution generally is about being as lazy as you can possibly be without dying, right? Why would evolution bother putting something like this? Putting, as though it's got agency. Why would you get something like this as a result of evolution?
Okay, there's a couple of things there I want to mention. So the first is, why would we bother? Let's start with agency. So she says, as if it has agency. To have agency is to be able to make your own decisions. So humans have agency. Evolution doesn't decide to evolve, to change. It just happens. It's just natural. So she's saying evolution has decided, and then she corrects herself and says, actually, evolution doesn't have agency. It doesn't actively make these decisions. It just happens over time. So if someone doesn't have agency, they're not able to make their own decisions. If someone has agency, something has agency, makes their own decisions and actively makes those decisions. She also said, why bother? Now, this is a very, I think, British thing to say, to bother to do something. So it comes from not being bothered or to be bothered. I can't be bothered means I could physically do it, but I don't want to. I'm lazy. I don't want to do it. So when we say why bother, it's like, why would you put all that effort into doing that thing if you're not going to receive the same kind of effort back? So here she's saying, why bother having this reaction? What's the point in it? Is it worth all the effort?
And then, just a couple of years ago, this group of scientists led by Ilona Croy had this genius idea. They took a group of mothers and they put them in a room holding their babies. And they didn't tell them what they were doing. They just sat back and observed them. And every single one of the mothers started stroking their babies. They weren't just stroking their babies randomly. Every one of them was stroking their babies at exactly the frequency that these neurons fire at. Right? This is like no training, no kind of calibration. This is just like maternal instinct.
Now, the word stroking is exactly the action she was doing, to stroke. So we stroke an animal, we stroke our pet, but we can also, of course, stroke a human, stroke their hand, stroke their leg, stroke your hair, whatever. I want to just go over what she explained here because she said it quite quickly. And I want to make sure you understand. So the scientists put a group of mothers and their babies in a room. They didn't explain to the mothers or their babies. Well, why would they explain to their babies? Their babies can't speak. They didn't explain to the mothers what they were doing. And all of the mothers, one by one, started stroking their babies at exactly the same speed without being told to do so. So this showed the scientists this was something instinctual, something inane. I'll have both of those words up on the screen, but they mean something that's inside us that we can't change. It's part of our evolution, our DNA.
No training, no kind of calibration. This is just like maternal instinct.
Okay, she said calibration. Calibration is typically used to describe machinery. When you calibrate machinery or technology, it's to set it up to perform a certain way. So she's talking about there's no calibration here. They weren't set up to perform a certain way. And then she went on to say maternal instinct, but I'm going to play that whole sentence for you first.
Calibration, this is just like maternal instinct that knows the exact rhythm to make their baby feel good. And we now know that this neuron firing, right, is linked with lowering the baby's heart rate, reducing the baby's stress. And if you do this for preterm babies, you will literally reduce the amount of time that they spend in hospital.
A preterm baby, when we say that a mother carries a baby to term, it means that they've the full 37 weeks that a human needs to have a baby. If they were born before those 37 weeks, they are referred to as preterm, because sometimes they can have health issues related to being born early. So preterm means they were born early. Now, it's amazing what she's explaining here. I hope you understand why I think this is such a fascinating piece of information, and she explains it in such a beautiful way. And I think it's so nice that in the world that we're living in, where hate seems to be the one thing that's fueling everything, we all, no matter how strong, how I can't think of another word for strong. No matter how independent we might be, we all react to the feeling of a mother's touch, regardless if it's from your mom or your dad, it doesn't matter. It's that feeling, that stroking feeling. We all, inside us, react to that. It might not be something we physically react to, but our body reacts to. I think that's very beautiful.
How gorgeous is that? That there is this like built-in biological lullaby that we are all pre-programmed to know the rhythm to even before we're born. What an added win that it just so happens to work for adults too.
Biological lullaby. A lullaby, every country, every culture will have a different type of lullaby, but a lullaby is something that you sing to a baby, typically to get them to sleep. So in the UK, we have many, and I'm not going to sing any for you because I cannot sing. But for example, there's one where Mockingbird, you might know the Mockingbird song because Eminem also did a rap on the Mockingbird in the 2000s, but it says something like, don't cry, I'll buy you a mockingbird. Okay, you don't want a mockingbird, I'll buy you a diamond ring. Okay, you don't want a diamond ring, and it goes on and on. So it's this kind of soft, calming song to get your baby to sleep or to stop crying. A very quick video. Well, I say it was a very quick video. My recording is telling me it's nearly 30 minutes, but her video was very short, but I really liked it. I really enjoyed this topic. I think we need more news and stories like this in the world at the moment. If you have anything interesting you want to share, please do below. I hope there were some scientific words you could learn here today. And of course, new vocabulary that you can use in many different situations. Thank you, as always, for supporting. Please like the video, and I will see you next time. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.